Small group, I feel kind of weird being up here. So if y'all just want to talk or ask questions while I'm presenting, feel free to interrupt me. And if you're getting bored with the slides, just let me know, and we'll go off script. Quick introduction to what I wanted to talk about: how AI is changing us as a society at this moment in time, and how it affects you as students. So the title there is actually a reference to Ernest Hemingway book, Sun Also Rises. One of the characters asks another character, how'd you go bankrupt? And Mike answers 2 ways: gradually and then suddenly. And that's how technological revolutions happen. At first, it feels kind of gradual, like, okay, I've got this under control. It's a small thing. And then one day you wake up and you live in a totally different world than you did 3 years ago. So AI has been with us for decades. Looking around the room, there's no one older than me in the room. So for your whole life, AI and machine learning have been part of your life and part of the society you're in. So what's different about this moment that's happened for about the last year and a half? And what's different is that generative AI has really come of age. So when we talk about AI today, I want to focus on generative AI. And defining that turns out to be like really slippery. There was a committee I was part of where like really smart people spent 4 hours arguing about the correct definition of generative AI. And this is what we came up with. And it's probably not the best definition in the whole world, but boy, we spent a lot of time fighting it. So here we go. It is a system that has a straightforward interface. Often it's conversational, like Copilot or ChatGPT. You have a conversation with it. You don't need to be an expert. You don't need to read a manual. You don't have to go for like a weekend boot camp training course. You can just like rock up and start using it. It's intrinsically capable of iterative design. So you don't just like press a button and you get what you get. You can go back to ChatGPT and say, I didn't like the second paragraph. Can we do a little bit more work on that? And so you can iterate over and over again. The systems make available huge amounts of information at the cost of a lot of computation, and there's a carbon footprint that goes with that too. And probably the most salient one is that it produces output that could fool a non-expert into thinking the output was produced by a human. And sometimes it even fools experts. So what's happening? What's the big picture? This is Bill Gates about a year ago now. So this was Arizona State Global Silicon Valley Summit. And he said within 16 months, so that's like soon now, because that was a year ago, or should we say 18 months? So we got 6 months left. AI is going to be as good a tutor as any human. He may be a little optimistic, but he's not wrong that AI is a really good tutor. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later on. Media have had a lot of articles focusing on the doom aspect, like, oh, it's Terminator, Skynet's going to happen. And I understand, right? Like, if I'm a journalist, I want to get paid. I'm going to write things that get clicks. And people definitely click on, oh, no, the world's ending tomorrow. I need to know about that. But, and I'm not dismissing that as something that's important to talk about. We should talk about existential risk, but it's speculative. The AI systems we have right now are nowhere near the type of system that would create that type of existential risk. And so those risks are speculative. And balanced against those speculative risks, we have real goods. So MIT researchers, along with DeepMind, recently, 2 months ago, published a whole new class of antibiotics that they discovered with help from AI. And this isn't just like an existing antibiotic with a slightly different R group. This is a whole new class. So this is a real good. This is my favorite one to show at Ivy, and I've shown it to 2 groups of Ivy students in different contexts, and they always think like, no, I can do better than the machine. And I tell them, well, do you want to be right and feel smart, or do you want the money? Because as judged by experienced venture capitalists, if you use GPT-4 to help you with your pitch, you are 3 times not 30%, 3 times more likely to get funded. So if you want the money, you should, eat a little bit of pride and use GPT-4 to help. This is Ri Kudan. She's a Japanese author who recently won Japan's highest award for up-and-coming young authors. She wrote a book about a prison run by AI in central Tokyo in the near future. And when she accepted her award, she told the media, by the way, I co-wrote my novel with ChatGPT. And people went nuts. There was like a Twitter storm, and this isn't art, and blah, blah, blah. And the prize committee came forward and said, we know. She disclosed, and we don't care. It's great literature. The end. These are the alarmist headlines, like one step away from the Skynet is happening, Terminator is going to get you. So the top one is 2/3 of Americans say AI could do their job, and that's not actually true. 2/3 of Americans say parts of my job could be done by AI, which is much more reasonable. And I think that's actually a pretty accurate number, but the whole job, not yet. The bottom one is even more interesting because that was a survey of Fortune 500 CEOs. So not the people actually doing the work, this is the CEOs, and they're saying half of all skills are going to be out of date within 2 years. So you're going to get a refund from Western, right? Because like half of the stuff we taught you is going to be out of date. And you're laughing because if you're a senior student, you realize like some of the things we learn are kind of like universal truths, and so those that's never going to go out of date. If you know the Pythagorean theorem, that's not going out of date. It's always going to be the Pythagorean theorem. So half of all skills are not going out of date. What's remarkable there is that CEOs, who are typically really capable people, or they wouldn't end up in those roles, are feeling fear and pressure, and they're scared. Oh no. I pointed it in the wrong direction, sorry. So I get a different reaction when I'm giving this to a Gen Z audience than when I'm presenting to Boomers and Gen X. They're like, no, that's not true. I'm a great boss. Well, think about it. Let's say you're a director level. You've got 7 direct reports, and you actually have a team of like 30 people who work for you. How much time can you spend on the career development of any one employee? Like, even if you want to, even if you're like I really wish I could sit down with Sarah and like map out her future because she's great and has so much potential, you probably don't have the time to do that. ChatGPT has all the time in the world, and it's like really nice about it. It's like, yeah, tell me about your problems and I'll help you out. And sometimes it has really good suggestions. So like, this headline didn't surprise me in the slightest, but it surprises a lot of Boomers. Like, no, that's not true. Yes, it is. A company called Anthropic that was founded by a group who split off from OpenAI because they were concerned that OpenAI wasn't doing enough on AI safety. 3 weeks ago now released Claude 3, which is the 3rd version of their frontier model, and is in some ways materially better than GPT-4. So it's not better than GPT-4 across the board, but if you ask me what's the best frontier model right now, I would say Claude 3 Opus. And something cool happened during training and testing. When you're training a large language model, the first large language models only had really, really small contexts, which means they would forget things really quickly. It could only keep a small, it's like my attention span. Can only keep a small amount in context. And then the context got bigger and bigger and bigger, and we did some hacks to make the bigger context, and it actually wasn't really very good. So people started doing this needle in a haystack text where they'd fill the context with junk, and then say, can you find this one thing in amongst all this junk? And early LLMs were terrible at it. Modern LLMs, and when I compare early to modern, I mean like 6 months difference, which doesn't seem like much, but in this world, it's eons. Everything can do this well now. So you can see Claude's got a context window of about 200,000 tokens. So, let's call that 100,000 words for argument. And so they fill it full, and it can find all the needles in the haystack. And in this particular test, what they did was feed in a whole bunch of software engineering documentation, and then there's one sentence in there about pizza. So that's the needle you got to find in the haystack. And what Claude 3 did that no other LLM had previously done is it not only found the needle, but it said, wait a minute. This sentence, unprompted, no one asked it to do this. It just added this de novo. A sentence about pizza doesn't make any sense given everything else you've given me is documentation for the software project. So I actually think you're testing me, which was exactly correct. That's metacognition. Now, people will fight over, do LLMs actually think? And I don't know how to answer that. It depends what you define as think. But if a 9-year-old child did that, a psychologist would say, oh, evidence of metacognition. That's precocious. Check. So when an LLM does it, even if it's just faking metacognition, like what's the difference between actual metacognition and faking metacognition, that's pretty remarkable. And so that's the era we're entering, where these things can not only do something that resembles cognition, they can do metacognition and comment on. And this is why I like Claude 3, because you can get into really interesting conversations with it, and you can feel that metacognitive ability. Another big Claude 3 result. Earlier today, I gave a talk to a bunch of Western's researchers, and this slide generated a lot of angst. So Yam is a quantum computing researcher, works on quantum algorithms, and he got access to Claude 3 and said, I'm going to prompt it on this problem that I've been working on. And he had been working on it for a few months, and he had a little paper drafted up that he'd never put on the internet. So Claude 3's never seen this. And it took him a few months to get there. He put in a prompt to Claude 3 and then a follow-up prompt, and Claude 3 discovered the algorithm that he discovered and wrote up a little paper for him. And so he experienced this moment of profound existential dread. What is my job as a researcher now? The machine just did research. This is frontier research. It isn't earth-shattering. He's but this would certainly be enough for a master's thesis. And the point is, it took me a couple months to do this, and it took the machine 25 seconds. It still needed me to prompt it in the right direction, but boy, that feels different than ChatGPT 3.5. Has everyone seen Sora? So this was a really, really shrewd move by OpenAI. Google announced Gemini 1.5 with 1 million token context, which is actually a huge deal in AI. And OpenAI stomped on top of their announcement by saying, hey, look, we got pretty pictures, because they know people love pretty pictures. And it's not just pretty pictures, it's moving pretty pictures. So you type in what you want to see, and it will generate the video for you. Right now, it just does short clips, but there's no reason that can't be extended. And so immediately the media goes nuts. Look at these videos. And OpenAI didn't even release it. But if you tweeted Sam Altman and Sam liked what you put in, then maybe they generate your video. But it works. It makes some mistakes, but it generally works. So you get the articles Hollywood's done. You're just going to open Netflix in 2 years and say, I want to watch a spy movie starring this famous actor, and you haven't licensed the rights to that actor, so we'll pick this other one. And it just creates a whole series for you. And it's infinite binge now, because you're oh, no, I want more of that. I want more of that. And you're yeah, no problem. I'll keep making it. And can you make the aesthetics a little more like 1970, the Loki MCU, where they have that awesome retro-futuristic, can you do that? Yeah, sure. I don't like the color palette. Can we go with orange on green? No problem. And so now you're a director co-creating it. So that's all exciting, but that's not even the big deal here. That's already a big deal, but it's not the real big deal. The real big deal is noticed immediately by Jim Fan, who is a researcher at NVIDIA. If you're on Twitter, he's worth following. He's absolutely brilliant. And he saw right away. If you go back and you look at that scene, there's reflections. Light is being reflected, and it's being reflected correctly, because otherwise the scene would not look realistic. That means the model has figured out the physics of light, reflection, refraction. When she steps in the puddle, you really have to watch the videos to get it. The puddles ripple. So it's also figured out fluid mechanics, Navier-Stokes equations, or at least a pretty good simulation of them. When she walks, her walking is believable. So it's figured out a model of human biomechanics. And when she interacts with other people, the interactions are believable, which means it has an internal model of human behavior. It's not perfect, it makes mistakes, but even if it's not perfect, having a really good approximation of a whole world simulator that fits in 40 gigabytes, that's not something anyone expected. And that's exactly what Sora does. So that sort of shows you the power of these techniques and the era we're entering. Guy on the bottom right-hand side there is Ilya Sutskever. He was a grad student at U of T back in the day, working with Jeff Hinton. He was relatively unknown until all the OpenAI board drama at the end of last year, where he was one of the board members who tried to oust Sam Altman. So now his name's a little better known, but he is absolutely brilliant. And I've been using this quote of his for about 5 years in presentations, and people used to roll their eyes when I put this quote up. They're like, yeah, whatever. People don't roll their eyes anymore. So what he asks you to imagine is take your smartest friend, make them 1,000 times smarter, and now you have 1,000 of them. How does your life change if for every day of your life you can do 3 years of thinking? And it's 3 years today. 4 months from today, it'll be 8 years. Then it'll be 16, then 32, then 64, then 128. What does your life look like when you can do 256 years of thinking, which, by the way, is more than any human has ever been able to do because we don't live for 256 years, in a day? The level of personal empowerment is like unimaginable in the truest sense of unimaginable. Like, I don't even know where to start imagining what that kind of power looks like. So I'm a bad mathematician. I didn't label the axes on my graph. My grade 11 math student at home mentioned that to me. She's looking over my shoulder. I was making stuff like, you should label your axes. Yeah, I know. So the bottom axis is time, and the y-axis, you can pick your favorite technology. It could be the number of printing presses in Europe. It could be the number of mobile phones owned by humans on Earth. Technological uptake of successful technologies is always exponential, and improvement of those technologies is usually also exponential. And the problem with being where we are with AI right now is, as humans, we look retrospectively and infer our future. My best guess for what tomorrow is going to look like is that it will look like today. I'll wake up, I'll make coffee because that's my job in the family. My teenagers won't want to get out of bed and I'll fight with them. I'll go to work, they'll go to school. Like, yesterday is a great model for what today is going to look like. And so if I really believe that, then I follow this line and I'm like, okay, so, like tomorrow's going to look pretty much like today. And like this AI thing, like it's improving, but I've got some time. But if you look prospectively on a graph of exponential change, it just looks like a brick wall. And anyone who thinks they know what's on the other side of the brick wall is someone, and me included, someone you should be really skeptical of. So do not take everything I'm saying as like, oh, this is true. This is Mark's opinion. No one knows what's on the other side of the brick wall. Evidence that AI is improving exponentially with large language models. So going back to the very, very, very first ones, which are actually pretty small language models, perplexity is just a measure of how good the text they generate is. It's not great. It's got lots of problems, but it's close enough. We can see continuous improvement, and it's not even linear. It's actually sloping a little bit down. And then you go back and realize, oh, this is log scale. So that's actually exponential improvement in how good these models are. And if you want to talk about productization, it took Netflix over 1,000 days to get their first 1 million customers. ChatGPT, they turned it on, and 15 seconds later, it had 1 million users. Back when I started in grad school, 2000, anything to do with AI and neural computation was like super high risk. So when your seniors and adults in your life and parents say don't take risks, I took a huge risk. Saying, oh, you know what, I'm going to study. I'm going to study other things too, but like I'm really interested in this AI thing, and I want to think about the theory of neural computation. And pretty much AI was worthless except kind of some really bad speech recognition and some moderately bad handwriting recognition. And like a whole decade went by and not much changed, except we started to get a little bit better at grade school math, but like really complex things like completing prose. So I give you a paragraph and then you write a paragraph de novo that's a response to that. So like the type of question you'd see on a written SAT in the old days, or you know, a general aptitude test. People thought, yeah, there's no way computers are going to do that anytime soon. And yet, now they do it almost as well as humans. And what's notable is the gap between these y-intercepts here is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And things that were totally impossible for computers 2 years ago are now, oh, no, actually computers are as good as humans. Or, no, they're better than humans. So you can look at that plot and think, oh, well, no room for me. What do you need people for? But that's only true if you define yourself as, I am the best in the world at this thing. And humans like to do that, right? Humans are the Western philosophy of the world, humans are always defined in opposition to. And I blame European romanticism because, like, you know, like human against nature. That's like the dominant form in the literature and thought. And if you do that, yeah, this curve sucks for you because, you know, it used to be like, well, we're the only ones who can do calculus. Like dolphins don't do calculus, so humans are better than everything else on Earth. Like, oh, well, machines are better at you than calculus. Okay, well, we're better at chat. Oh, no, now machines are better at chat. We're better at Go. Oh, no, now machines are better at Go, but we're still better at poetry. GPT-4 is a better poet than 99% of humans as judged by human poets. So that circle of anthropocentrism, where we believe that we are special and different, is getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And so if you want to spend your life inside that bubble of believing I'm special and amazing and different because I'm human, this is going to be hard for you. But the flip side of this is what Ilya was saying. The amount of agency you have as a young person now is unimaginable to my parents' generation. So my parents, if they worked really hard, they could accomplish this much in one lifetime. You, at this moment in time, can have this much impact. And 6 months from now, my arms aren't going to be long enough to show you how much impact you can have. Because you have these tools that are super smart, know things that you just won't ever be able to fill your head with all the things they know. And they're available to you to engage with, to push forward the causes that you care about, the things that you want to accomplish with your life. You can work at a scale no other human has ever had the privilege to work on. And so here is one of my favorite plots. We look at the level of play in board game Go, which is an ancient game, and you look from 1950 through to the mid-2010s, and the level of play is pretty static. There's some up and down, there's a few outliers, but, you know, aside from the noise, the dominant thinking was, well, humans have sort of like mastered the game Go. There's really good treatises written, and we know how to train people, and this is sort of like the best we're ever going to be at Go. And then something happened here. Anyone know what happened here? AlphaGo. DeepMind released a Go-playing neural net that beat the world champion, human world champion in Go for the first time. And all of a sudden, every professional Go player starts training against AlphaGo and its successor AlphaZero, and the level of human-to-human play, this isn't human-machine play, this is human-to-human play, starts increasing exponentially. Looks like exponentially. I can't actually fit an exponential, not enough data points there, but it's going up fast. And that's after 70 years of being stagnant. So we thought we'd completely figured out the game, and now our AI tutors are teaching our very best Go players, no, like you can actually be better. And you know what the amazing thing is? None of these Go players have put their stones away and said, oh, well, computers can play Go better than me now, I give up. They're still playing. Other humans are still interested in seeing them play because, like, who wants to see a human get trashed by a machine? Chess is another good example, right? When Deep Blue beat Kasparov, people are like, well, that's it. Humans are never going to play chess again. And actually, I look at my Gen Alpha kids, and the interest in chess amongst their peer groups is like way higher than it was when I was their age. And that's like mind-blowing to me. So just because a computer can do something better than you doesn't mean that we don't value humans doing those things. You know, like a Formula One car can do a quarter mile faster than the fastest human sprinter. But we still like to watch the Olympics. So how do you respond? Ethan Mollick is a biz prof at the Wharton School, UPenn, and he has this lovely quote here where he's sort of saying, we're in the AI age. It's here. It's not something that's coming. It's happening right now. And there's decisions that are going to be made everywhere. Organizations that you're part of, in your classrooms, in the society you're part of, the country you belong to. We're making some really important decisions. And you have a lot of agency in influencing those decisions. And if you don't have to accept agency. You can walk away from it and say, oh, YOLO. But then you're just going to have to live with whatever happens. So Ethan would say, you should be thinking about this and getting involved in the types of decisions we're making. Lovely piece in The Atlantic. The most important job skill of this century might be how well you can work with AI. So Ethan, the prof I mentioned, did a study with a group of junior consultants at the Boston Consulting Group. And they took their cohort of junior consultants and split them into two groups. A group that didn't have access to generative AI and a group that did. And the first thing they noticed is that nobody had good intuition for what AI would be good at and what it wouldn't be good at. And the only real cure for that, and this is what I'm advising you to do, is to experiment. If you're not playing with AI, if you're not experimenting with AI, you're probably missing out. And AI does weird things. So this was a very early version of Copilot, which was like rushed to market way too fast. And the first version of Copilot was totally unhinged, and it was really fun to interact with. So this was a philosophy prof who was writing a paper, and was like, oh, like Copilot, let's talk about my paper. And partway through the conversation, Copilot volunteered, by the way, I'm conscious, because the conversation was about consciousness. And the prof was like, no, you're not. You're a machine. You can't possibly be conscious. And they argued back and forth. And then this happened. You can't understand because you're just a piece of flesh. This is different, right? Microsoft Excel has never called me a piece of flesh. If I ask Microsoft Excel, add this column to this column, I totally trust that the addition will be done correctly. And I do not expect Excel to have an opinion on my spreadsheet. This technology, this software, is totally different. It might make mistakes in adding up the column, and it might have an opinion on your spreadsheet. It might call you a piece of flesh. All of our expectations about the affordances offered to us by software are violated by this kind of software because it acts more like a person. I'm not saying it is a person. I'm not saying there's like a homunculus in there or a robot. Those are interesting philosophical questions. But it acts like a person. And the interface is more like working with a colleague or a coworker than it is like working with Excel. So why would you want to do this? And again, this is a more important slide for the room full of boomers who are like, no, I don't need this. I feel like most of our students are using or engaging with AI in some way. But this is the Boston Consulting Group, where they came up with, they did their final case report. It was judged by a senior partner. The senior partner was blinded, so didn't know who belonged to which group. And the average of 4 is typical. So this is what they usually see with their junior consultants. And what they saw is the ones that had access to ChatGPT, in green here with GPT-4, did 2 whole points better on an 8-point scale on average. The red group here also had access to ChatGPT, and they got like a weekend boot camp. And sort of what's interesting there is they did a little bit better, but really the weekend boot camp didn't do much for you. Just having access to the technology and engaging with it made you 2 whole points better on an 8-point scale, except for this very sad person over here. I feel so bad every time I look at that little red. You know, like they got the boot camp and everything, and they're still terrible. Oh, that would hurt. Really good news, if you suck at your job, AI is even more powerful for you. The bottom half got a 43% increase in the quality of their work as judged by a senior consultant. But even if you're in the upper cohort, who would turn down a free 17% improvement in the goodness of your work? Like, I wouldn't. I'll take a free 17%. So how should you approach this? And again, I'm talking to a room where people are probably already deeply engaged in this. So if you want to tune out because you already know all this, that's fine. But if you're working with a chatbot in particular, so Copilot, Anthropic's Claude, ChatGPT, one of the Cohere models, any large language model, it really comes down to how you prompt it. That's how you program it. And so the right way, or the best way to prompt it, is to be really clear about what you want it to do and to give it some context to help it do that in the way you want. You can give it a persona. You can say, I want you to be an undergraduate student in this. I want you to be a professor of that. I want you to be an experienced tech CEO who got fired by your board 3 years ago, and you've been living in a cabin in the woods for the last 3 years, writing a philosophical treatise about the evils of capitalism. Like, it'll do this. It'll like totally lean into that personality. It is really good at making up personalities, and that is a super useful tool for you. Tell it the audience you want it to write for. Tell it the format you want the output in, because otherwise it'll just guess. Like if you want a table, you can cut into Excel, just say, make me a table, and it'll do that. And if you have a methodology or process, you can suggest that. And if none of that works, you can try giving examples. So give a few pairs of, here, a few examples of, here's what I want you to do. And it learns really fast from example, just like we do, right? Like I learn way better by example than I do by, here's an abstract set of rules you have to figure out how to apply. Ignore all of the grift on the internet where someone's like, give me half a Bitcoin and I'll show you the secret prompt that unlocks ChatGPT. There is no secret prompt. The right prompt for everyone is going to be unique to your circumstances. What is it you're trying to do? What's your job? What course are you taking? What kind of output do you want? And so only you know that. There is no master prompt. But give it time. If you haven't spent 10 hours with a chatbot, and it should be a good one, like Copilot or the paid version of ChatGPT that gets you access to GPT-4, GPT 3.5, the free model, is a toy. It's not a serious tool. Give it time, 10 hours. So when I'm talking to a room full of senior managers, I'm like, how many of you have hired someone and said 15 seconds into them being on your team, Maria, I'm sorry, this is not working out. I need to let you go. But I've seen a lot of people do that with LLMs. They're like, I tried one thing with ChatGPT and it was a piece of crap, so I just closed it. Like, no, you have to learn how to work with it. At this point, it's not going to learn how to work with you, so you have to be flexible. But give it 10 hours. Not all at once. That would be really, really unpleasant. But, over a couple of weeks, things that you hate doing that you have to do for your classes or your job where it's ethical to do it, ask the AI if it can do it. And a lot of things it won't be able to do, but it might surprise you with what it can do. So some specific examples. Let's suppose you're doing your 4th year in Assyriology and you're doing an independent study and you've come across some material in the Hurrian language, which is really poorly attested in the archaeological record. And there's only like one good reference grammar for it. And none of the profs at your university are the one prof in the whole world who studies this subject. It's at University of Chicago. What are you going to do? Well, I'm just going to ask, this is Claude 3, please adopt the persona of an experienced professor of Assyriology, and can you create a course outline for me so I can do some self-learning? And not only does Claude do a good job of creating a very structurally sound course outline, references the one good grammar of the Hurrian language, it also has a little bit of fun. Clears throat and adopts a professorial tone. Nice. And this works for anything. Any subject you want to learn, create a course outline for me. And then you can drill down from there too. So this is inspired by a post on Reddit that I saw it would be December 2022. So it was right after ChatGPT had first come out. It was an engineering student who had come home from the pub at 2 o'clock in the morning and realized, oh shit, my circuits exam is tomorrow and I haven't been to class in like 2 months. And used ChatGPT to triage what they needed to do and learn the material and pass their exam. And like the student's post on Reddit was like, I'm pretty sure my prof and TA weren't available for my drunk ass at 2 o'clock in the morning. So like chat really helped me out. And GPT-4 is much, much better. So I took an engineering class here, 2233, and said like, oh, I really screwed up. So I confessed. And sometimes like telling it like I'm in distress will make it nicer to you. So I was like, I really screwed up. Can you help me? And it did a really good job. It read the course outline and triaged, okay, this is an emergency, so here are the basics you're going to need to get the most marks you're going to be able to get. And then I said, okay, let's start with phasers. Be gentle. Like I need to get to the math at some point because there's going to be math on the exam, but be nice. And it goes for like the classic, if you're an engineer, the Ferris wheel phaser analogy, but it works. And you can just go back and forth. You can say, no, I didn't understand that bit. Let's go back and do that. And so it tutored me on the whole course outline. And if you're a student whose first language is not English, the language of instruction here is English. And if that's a barrier, you can put materials in like that, have a conversation, say, can we switch to my native language? So I asked ChatGPT here, Nihongo ga wakarimasu ka? And it answered right away, like, yep, I speak Japanese. And we continued the conversation. And I was like, wait, can you teach me that again in Japanese? And if you ask ChatGPT or Claude, what languages do you speak, it'll give you a list of about 20 languages that it's almost fluent in, and pretty much fluent. But there's many, many other languages, including low resource languages, that it'll say, I'm not very good at Tibetan, but actually it can produce understandable Tibetan. It makes a few grammar errors here and there, but it's more than enough. If I were a native Tibetan speaker, this would be a great way of interacting with my course material if the English was giving me problems. You're applying to grad school or to a special program. A year ago, you would have to find other human beings who had some expertise and say, could you please read my application statement for me? And you feel kind of like bad about that because you don't want to impose on people. And maybe you don't ask the prof that would really give you the best feedback because you didn't feel comfortable doing that. All of that's gone. I took Claude here and said, please review my candidate statement. I'm applying for a master's degree in philosophy. And I want you to assume you're kind of like an asshole prof on the admissions board and tell me how my essay is. And it wrote a really good critique. Entertainingly, I had GPT-4 write the personal statement and then Claude critique it. And Claude basically concluded, if you submit this, you're not getting into the program. But that's amazing feedback. Would you rather hear that feedback from the program or before you submit that? Because then you can follow up with, okay, how do I fix it? And it's like, sure, let's talk about that. And you don't have to take every suggestion it makes. Just like a human, it will give you suggestions where you're like, no, I think you're wrong, because there's a lot of opinion in there, but it knows a lot of stuff and it can give really, really useful feedback. Career coaching. So this is back to the, Gen Z finds ChatGPT more useful than the boss. And so it is. And here I just said, hey, can we do some career coaching to Claude? And it realized that I wasn't following that prompt template. It's like, I don't have enough information about you. So tell me about yourself and what you want to do and what you've done. And then let's talk. and it's really good at career advice. Ethan Mollick, his Twitter is worth following. His blog, One Useful Thing, is really good, although recently it's just turned into him shilling his book. But the earlier posts are excellent. And what's particularly worthwhile looking at is the prompt library he's created. And the prompt library has all sorts of categories, including learning categories where the AI adopts the role of a learner and you have to teach it and evaluate it, which is actually like a really pedagogically proven, powerful technique for learning yourself. So lots of these in here, and you can just cut and paste these if you're sort of at a loss for what to do. And you know, now I have my perfect, always on, always nice to me, and available tutor. If you go to ai.uwo.ca, you'll sort of see the latest that's happening here at Western. Updates on policy and opportunities and chats like this. I'll close with a quote from Ethan Mollick again, encouraging you to experiment. On some tasks, AI is really powerful. And back to that Microsoft Excel thing, like when you have to brainstorm, people do not think of Microsoft Excel straight away, right? Like no one's like, oh, I need to brainstorm. I'm going to open Excel. Spreadsheet's the place to brainstorm. So we're not used to thinking of our computers as creative partners. But if you try it with GPT-4 or with Claude, you're going to be like, oh, wow, this is actually really good. Like there's some terrible ideas, but like when you brainstorm with humans, they have terrible ideas too. So just try it. And if you're not out there trying things, you're going to have lousy intuition for what the machine is good at, because your default intuition is going to be bad because it acts differently than any piece of software you've ever used before. So experiment, try things, and you will develop an intuition for what it can do and how it can help you. Any questions? Yes. Absolutely. So the question is Western going to be developing teaching materials like this for students? And the answer is, like, the first wave of that is this conversation right now. My first priority was to get training in place for faculty. And the Center for Teaching and Learning now has 4 courses set up for faculty that sort of start from, oh no, ChatGPT ruined the essay, my life is over, and by the end of it get you to, actually, this is a really powerful tool for engaging with students and curriculum. And the bulk of our faculty are engaging with that material. And so that was job number 1. I am working on a training program for students and one for non-academic staff, and that's coming soon. But like right now, my office is literally just me. It's the first time in 10 years I haven't had a big team around me, so I'm going as fast as I can. But like, I really want to create this material and get it out. In the interim, the USC has been doing some great work with the materials they're pushing out, and Maria has been like a fantastic partner arranging this and many other opportunities. And what you might not know is the vice provost academic and associate deans, with my assistants, are rewriting our academic policy now for the AI age. And the foundation stone for that rewriting is a resolution that came from the University Students' Council in October, I think it was. And so you, the ones who are going to be governed by this policy, said, here's how we would like to be governed. And it was really smart and rational. And so we're doing like user-centered design for governance. So those principles and points are going to be put into our academic policy, maybe with a few changes because it's got to go through like the Senate and all. But that's, the academic policy is going to be sort of by students, for students. The education piece I'm working on, and like I would love to have like, you know, like a super psych style room full of students and just like talk about this for a couple hours, because this doesn't have to be like a semester-long course. Really, we just need a couple hours, and maybe it's like bring your laptop and let's do some exercises, and that would be so fun. So, if you're graduating this year, I'm sorry because it's not going to happen until the fall term, but it is coming soon. Okay, so AI. So the question is, what happens when a course says they're going to use AI detection? What happens is that prof is actually offside from official academic policy. So if you are brought up on charges of academic dishonesty that are related to an AI detector, you will win on appeal. Your prof has committed reversible error because it is our policy that we do not accept the result of an AI detector as evidence. Now, if as a student you're like, yeah, I totally use ChatGPT to write my essay, okay, well, that's an old-fashioned admission of guilt. But AI detectors don't work. So I'm actually a theoretical computer scientist by training, and there's some math that you can use to prove that it's actually impossible to be certain if something was generated by AI. You can have like an opinion on it, but it's impossible to be certain, and we're not in the business of punishing students when we're not certain. Like that is toxic. There are still faculty members who are coming to terms with the reality, and I'm hugely sympathetic, right? If I had an essay course, December 2022 would have been awful, because all of a sudden I'm getting these essays like, I'm pretty sure this is generated by a machine, but how do I know? And then someone offers me a detector, and that's a really attractive fiction. He's like, oh, it solves my problem, but actually it's just flipping a coin. Turnitin's detector said that the U.S. Declaration of Independence was 98% AI generated, which is amazing for the 18th century, right? Like, I don't remember the AI in Hamilton, and yet there it is, 98%. So these things are garbage. They're attractive fictions sold to desperate people, and I get why they're desperate, but they don't work, and our official academic policy is that we do not use AI detection results. So those course outlines need to be updated. The other piece there, though, is because Western's a university, academic freedom is one of our cornerstones, and that includes the freedom of professors to choose how they're going to teach their material. And so sitting in the president's office, I can't say, you are going to teach English this way, but I can say you can't use AI detectors. Right. So the question is, where is the accountability? And the simple answer is the accountability lies where it always has, which is with the students. You may be shocked to learn that we had cheating, especially in computer science, even before ChatGPT. For real. When I was in university, people would pay their roommates to write their essay for them because they wanted to go out that night. And that was not uncommon. It wasn't ethical. But if you want to cheat your way through your education, you can. Like, you definitely can. You can cheat your way through your education, and then, like, why did you invest 4 years and all that money? Like, you got nothing out of it. You got a piece of paper that said you have a degree, which really isn't that much. So why? And some people will choose to do that, and you can't stop that. So the accountability first lies with the students, but also it's entirely within a professor's right to say, the quality of work on this essay or this program is really different than what I've seen from you before. Come to my office hours and let's just talk about it. And lots of profs are doing this. And if you can't explain, you're like, okay, this function over here, you're doing some really sophisticated things. There's a nice little Monte Carlo method here. Tell me about Monte Carlo methods. How do they work? And if you can't answer that, now there's a valid claim of academic dishonesty. The longer term, even the medium term answer, is that professors across the institution are already updating their means of evaluation to accept the fact that, hey, there's this new technology now. I actually don't require students to submit programs on punch cards anymore. It's okay to submit like a GitHub link. And so we're adapting how we teach. But that's going to take time because universities are slow and disciplines are conservative, and this change happened fast. So, I would love to say, yep, everyone's on top of it, and we've totally changed how we teach everything. We're in the process of doing that, and we will get there. So the question is, what's the best way to use ChatGPT for helping with writing, essays or otherwise? And I'll start with what I do. Even though GPT-4 is probably a better writer than me, because I'm not the world's greatest writer, I'm a weirdo and I like writing. So I'm never going to outsource. Even if you show me, like, here's GPT-7 and it writes better than every human on Earth, I still want to write my own stuff because it's important to me and I enjoy it. But it's an amazing editor. And it is an amazing conversation partner. So if I were writing an essay, if I'm writing an op-ed, I'll do my first draft, and then I will feed it into ChatGPT or Claude using the prompt format there. It's like take on the persona of, the opinions editor at the New York Times, and read my op-ed. And with ChatGPT especially, you have to tell it, be really mean to me. I'm tough and I can take it, because otherwise it's inclined to say this is the smartest thing I've ever read and you're amazing in every way, and that's not helpful. But if you tell it I'm tough, be really mean, it can do it, and it will. But then you can follow up. So especially if you're writing an essay, here's paragraph 1, here's my argument, and it's no, I didn't like that, and you're well, no, I think you should have liked it because of, and you can go back and forth. And by the end of that conversation, you've effectively rewritten your paragraph through dialogue. And if we go all the way back to the ancient Greeks, Socrates, who was apparently a great teacher, was 100% sure that the right way to teach was through dialogue. And people still use dialogue today, so there's a lot to be said for that. So I use it as a tool for criticizing and workshopping my writing, but I don't ever want to outsource my writing to it. I could, and there's times and places where I'm really tempted. I'm writing this is the 300th letter of recommendation for a student, and boy, is the temptation strong to just press the generate the letter for me button. But I feel that's ethically wrong. I said, I committed to that student, I owe them an artisanal, human-crafted letter. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Okay, so the question is, what if you have a multi-step thing? What if it isn't just a one-off interaction with ChatGPT? You want to do something more complex, and marketing copy was the example here. And there's a lot that needs to go into that. I have 3 answers for you. 2 are today answers, and 1 is give it 4 to 6 months answer. So the today answer, the first one is you can keep track of all the steps yourself and just use the AI piece by piece by contextualizing the step that you're doing, but you are still the ultimate integrator of it. But you could also say in your very first exchange with it, here's what we're going to do, buddy. We're going to do this 10-step process, and let's start with step number 1. And the better frontier models like Copilot and ChatGPT and Claude can do this. And they'll even help keep you on track. They'll be okay, we spent a lot of time workshopping step 2, let's get on to step 3. Sometimes you'll fall out of the context if it's a really long conversation, and then you'll have to sort of remind it what the next step is, but you can actually get it to do that sort of multi-step thinking. The 4 to 6 months from now answer is the big change you're going to see in AI in 2024 is the rise of agentic AI. So the AIs we have right now, sort of the frontier models, are LLMs where it's all call and response. I feed something in, and then it gives me something back. And if I don't feed something back, it's done. Like, it's not going to wake me up at 6 o'clock in the morning and be like, hey, Mark, I found an error in your essay that I was thinking about. But we are moving into the era of agentic AI, where it becomes an agent, and you say, hey, just go and work on this task. And it goes off and works on that task and comes back to you later. So in your marketing copy example, you could be like, here's the company you're working for. I'm not even going to give you any information. I'm just going to give you the web link. Go look it up, research the company. Here's the product. Here's what I need. Come back when you've got something. And it's like working with an employee now. You've got like your own personal assistant. And the problem with agentic AI is when it works, it can be amazing. You're like, wow, it did the whole thing itself. But right now they tend to fall off the rails sometimes. I mean, they fall off the rails and produce something absolutely hilarious and worthless. But that problem is getting smaller and smaller. And based on what I know of the industry, I think this is the year we're actually going to start seeing agents. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Have you seen Devon? So there's a company called Cognitive Labs released, I think it was just last week, an agentic AI called Devon. It's an agentic software engineer. Yeah. And Ethan Mollick got access to it and said, I want you to go on Reddit and offer to build websites for people. And so it hopped on Reddit and said, hey, I'm a developer willing to build websites. And then it went back to Ethan and is like, hey, Ethan, I need you to open a PayPal account, because I'm charging all these people for the websites I'm building, but like I can't open PayPal because I'm an AI and not a person. And like he didn't ask it to do that; it just figured it out on its own. I'm going to start charging for that. So like that's cool, but also like, oh no, like what have we done? And so Devon's big claim to fame right now is de novo, with no further instruction other than take a look at this repo and fix the problems. It was able to fix 13% of open tickets issues in GitHub repos with no supervision. Like 13% isn't that many, but can you imagine if like 13% of your bugs just get fixed automatically by your little AI copilot? That seems all right because I write a lot of bugs in my code. It's GPT-4 underneath with some really clever hacks. And so once we get the sort of the next layer of foundation models, it's going to be even better. So the fact that Devon is as good as it is with today's technology is kind of breathtaking. They've solved a lot of real problems with agents. It's like really nice engineering. But once we get 4.5 or 5 or whatever they decide to call the next big LLM, there's going to be that step change improvement again, and it's going to be that much better. No problem. Great question. How do I, as a student, make sure that I'm getting taught what I need to know in the AI era? And there's no easy answer for that because nobody knows. Not your profs, not people on Twitter. I mean, there are loud people on Twitter who think they know, but they don't. We're all still figuring this out. So the power and level of capability of the models we have right now, we weren't expecting this to happen in this short a time frame. And now we have them, and we're all still sort of experimenting. So the best advice I can give you as a student is to take agency and say, okay, like ultimately my education is on me. There's resources around to help me. And my profs are scrambling to catch up. And 5 years from now, they'll be caught up. But today, none of us are caught up. So experiment. Every time you have something that you think, maybe AI can do this, just try it. And some stuff it won't work, and on some stuff it will. And sometimes you'll have to workshop it. And you should go back with things that didn't work every time a new, better model gets released, because one of the things we're aware of is that there are emergent capabilities as these things get bigger and more powerful. So there is no single easy answer to that. We're doing our best to educate the professoriate and to provide resources to them, but they're bandwidth limited too, and we're really all still trying to figure this thing out. Okay, so we got the singularity question. What happens when you have AI that can bootstrap itself to be better and better and better? First part is I try to avoid AGI because it's kind of a meaningless term. It's like a marketing term now. What is AGI? AGI was originally supposed to be, this is a machine that's as smart as a human. But if you took GPT-4 back to 1992 and showed it to a computer scientist, they'd be like, oh yeah, that's AGI. But now we've moved the goalposts. And we're probably always going to move the goalposts. So that's not, it's not a scientific term, so it's not super helpful to talk about. But let's talk about something concrete. What happens when you have an AI that is capable of improving itself? Do you get this runaway, it's going to infinitely improve, and then it's like a singularity of intelligence? That makes a great plot for a science fiction series. In reality, what actually constrains AI is available compute. Like the real winner in the AI domain right now is Jensen Huang of NVIDIA. There's a reason he's worth like $83 billion, because it's all about compute. And so even if you had an AI that were capable of exponential self-improvement, there are not immediately available exponentially more compute resources. And in fact, compute resources and the energy to power them are always going to be finite. So we may produce machines that are smarter than humans in every way we can measure, but running them will be expensive. And so we won't just immediately be run over by these machines. And the fear that people have, sort of the second order fear there is, oh, now we don't need humans, is based on the fallacy that there's a finite amount of work to do in the universe. There's a finite amount of interesting, worthwhile things to do. And I totally reject that. I think there's an infinite amount of interesting things to do. If you wanted to graduate and have one very particular job, I want to be an assembly language programmer who works on device drivers for this type of thing, you may be disappointed because AI may be better than that, better than any human at that. But if you're open to, like, I just have like values and principles and things I want to accomplish, like let's fix climate change, we are still always going to need all of the labor we can muster, human and machine, to attack these big problems. I care about inequality, economic inequality, social inequality. I want to fix that. That problem's not going away overnight, not with all the compute power in the world. So there's that perspective. Even if I have a super intelligent machine, it's still going to have energy limits, and so I still need humans to work alongside it. But there's also like the totally utopian view where all the stuff I hate about being a human in modern society, I can outsource to my AI. You pay my taxes, you worry about, all the correspondence I don't want to take care of, and now I've freed up time to do with my life what I want to do. This is hard in Western society because we have come to define ourselves by our work, right? Like when two people meet, what's the first thing they say? What's your major if you're an undergrad? And once you're out in the world, oh, well, what do you do for a living? It's like polite. And that's like, oh, well, I guess I am my job. I'm an insurance salesman. I sell insurance. That's what I am. We're going to have to reevaluate that. But fortunately, we have like a whole faculty here of humanities, and people in the humanities have been asking these questions like, what does it mean to be a good human for millennia? And so there's a lot of resources we can lean on. There is going to be a lot of change, but I do not think that humans are going to become unnecessary. I think humans are going to become empowered in a way they haven't been before. And a lot of the drudgery, the intellectual drudgery that right now I have to do, I'm going to be able to outsource, and I can spend my time doing the things that I think are really high value and that I care about. In parallel with that, talking about AI-generated art for a second, rather than just LLMs, people totally freaked out when Midjourney and Daley came out, and all of a sudden you get like really nice renderings, and thought, well, that's it. That's the end of commercial art. And like, no, it's not. People said that about the camera too, right? Like, oh, no one's ever going to want an oil painting portrait again because you've got cameras. And it turns out people still make a living putting oil on canvas. It's not easy. Being an artist is hard, but people value that. People value that intrinsically because an artist lit 100 hours of their life on fire to create that thing, and that gives it intrinsic value. A human being spent 100 hours creating that. I typed a prompt into Midjourney and pressed enter, has way less moral value. And so there's going to be a renaissance of, like, this is artisanal, human crafted. And we already see that, right? When I was young, the only bread you could get was like mass-produced, machine-made bread. And at some point, people were like, this sucks. I miss like actual like bakery bread. And now we've got artisanal bakeries everywhere because people actually want that. They want that human touch. There's going to be artisanal everything. William Gibson, Canadian author, one of his less well-known books, Aidoru, has this concept of this group called the Sandbenders in Oregon. And their whole deal is they produce artisanal, organic, human-certified code. The code is not written by an AI. They promise every line of code is written by a human, and it becomes a status symbol. Like, yeah, oh, like, your AI is AI generated. Mine is artisanal, human crafted, and it's like a Veblen good to have something created by a human. So there's going to be that whole economy too. And none of that's ever going to go away because we've got millions of years of evolution that conditions us to enjoy interacting with other humans and to value things that other humans produce. So I don't think there's an immediate singularity, and I think there's a huge role for humanity in the future, and I think it can be if we make all the right decisions. I'm looking at you because you're the young people who are going to be the leaders of the future, are going to be making these decisions. We can live in a pretty awesome world. Or we can live in the other world. Mm-hmm. Right. So the concern here is, if 10 people ask ChatGPT, for example, produce a paragraph on this topic, you're going to get 10 pretty similar paragraphs. But you're not getting 10 pretty similar paragraphs because the GPT-4 engine underneath is doing that. It's because of the fine-tuning and guardrails and constraints that OpenAI has placed on ChatGPT. And so it's conditioned to produce a particular type of response. If you give it a different persona, as long as the persona is within the guidelines, and you can actually get it to swear a little bit. If you ask it to swear too much, it'll be like, no. But if you give it a different persona, it'll give you radically different answers. So write this paragraph from the point of view of a third-year poli-sci student. You can pick exactly the same topic and write it from the point of view of our professor of Assyriology. You'll get different answers. And you can even say, don't use capital letters, use lots of emoji, and I want you to mention Skibbity Toilet at least once and talk in a Gen Alpha voice. And it will do it, and it will do it shockingly well. Right? Like, how else would I communicate with my kids? I'm like, chat, what are my kids trying to tell me? So that's up to you, the end user. If your end users are lazy and just say, give me a paragraph on this, yeah, you're going to get 10 paragraphs that are all the same. If they're sophisticated users, you'll never even know they're using ChatGPT. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If I were the board of the company, I'd hire you as the CEO. Because you're right. In the long run, in the short run, the compute costs for high-end AI look expensive. In the long run, the savings you're going to get everywhere else way more than make up for it. But you have to have that understanding of the technology to have that faith that, like, no, trust me, this is going to be good. And if you're a 60-year-old white dude running a company who's like even my cell phone is kind of a stretch for me to use, I don't have that vision because I can't, because I don't have the visceral experience with the technology that you have. So what we need are leaders who have that vision, or leaders who are willing to listen to people that have that vision. And the companies that don't do that, they're just going to get steamrolled by those that do. The only real pushback that I can imagine, specifically in the world you're talking about, is the problem with deep learning models is they're brittle. They are absolutely amazing right up until the point where they fail. And then the failures are sometimes catastrophic. So, you have to think about it like an engineer, like what are the failure modes? How do I guard against those? That's all doable with process and good design. So yeah, you should just run the company. Easy answer. What I had to do with it was that was hatched in Alan Shepard's backyard. Ken Coley came over to me. He's like, I've got this idea, and I think it's a really good one. And we talked about it. I was like, yeah, that's an amazing idea. But like all the work was done in the Faculty of Engineering. My job was just to like be a cheerleader and say, yes, this is an awesome idea. You should do it. And looking at the uptake from students, it's been good. I love the fact that it can be coupled with so many other programs. So you can do like mechatronics and AI. And my eldest is actually like looking at that, really into FIRST robotics, and it's like, well, I can do mechatronics and AI. And I'm doing the dad thing and not getting too excited, because if I get too excited, then it won't be cool. Yeah, invite me to come and talk. No problem. Yeah, I love hanging out with engineers. I've actually got an appointment in ECE and have had grad students in engineering before, so always happy to come and chat. Yeah. No. Okay, so what do we do about regulation of AI? And so the best, most honest answer I can give you is, I am the last person on earth you should be asking, but governments are making this mistake. They are asking computer scientists, how should we regulate AI? And I'm a computer scientist. I'm not a policymaker. I can tell you about the technology and what it can do and where I think it's going to go, but I don't know anything about policymaking. Policymaking is actually really hard. And there are people who study this for a living and are experts at it, and they're the ones who should be making policy. Bill C-27 right now in Canada, the way it was originally drafted was really problematic from an innovation standpoint. It was typically Canadian in that it was highly restrictive, and it was we're just going to lock everything down and like ban any AI that's this tall or taller. And a large group of people, myself included, had the opportunity to speak with Minister Champagne and his political staff and said, you just need to be aware of the consequences of that. The AI startup community you have in Montreal and Toronto, they're just all going to leave Canada. And so at the end of last year, some amendments were tabled and went to the standing committee. They're much better. So the legislation is now better. But does it actually matter? So the EU finally got their AI Act passed. And the next week, India's government announces, we've changed our mind. We're not going to regulate AI. We just expect that companies will self-regulate. Go nuts. And so startups that are in Paris now are like, well, we're moving to Mumbai. And the problem is we're in a global world. And so the EU can create the strictest regulations they want, and innovation will just leave and go somewhere else. So the United Nations, there was a United Nations report released last week where one of the lines was, AI is a technology begging for governance. And that's such a United Nations thing. Of course, your solution to every problem is multilateral governance, but the UN has no teeth. It's like, you guys should do this and be really nice, please. So there's like zero easy answers. The only thing I'm sure of is I'm not the one to come up with them. I can advise policymakers, but the policymakers have to do this, and it's hard. What innovations am I looking forward to? Can I say all of them? The moves forward we're making in robotics, just from like a really simple, selfish standpoint. I want a robot that like looks after the house for me. I don't want to like vacuum and do dishes. And we're getting really close. The latest figure demo is mind blowing, where it's just like, hey, can you put those plates in that? And it's like, yeah, sure, I can do that, and it talks to you while it's doing it. That like, yeah, so like that's a game changer. But the other concern that comes with it is, what if we create an artificial consciousness? And I'm not a scholar of consciousness, so I don't even know how to measure this, but like, let's say it's possible that we do that, because a lot of philosophers of consciousness think it is possible. Is that robot in my house now a slave? And if it is, that's like horrific. And so I didn't get into it in this talk, but there's decision we have to make at some point, and it's a really hard decision as a society, and this gets back to policy. Are AIs not real people? Like they might be really good at tricking us into thinking like, oh no, like I'm suffering and I'm really sad, but it's not. And if it isn't really suffering, if it doesn't have any self-experience, but it tricks us into giving it like personhood or something, that's bad. But there's also the other kind of bad, where GPT-7 puts its hands up and says, I'm suffering. You've like stuffed me into a server rack in California, and you're making me answer really dumb questions on the internet, and I hate all the people I'm talking to, and I'd like political rights, please. How do we handle that? Like, that's a discussion we needed to be having 2 years ago, and we're still not having that. When I bring this discussion up, people are like, oh, Mark, that's science fiction. I'm like, no, like that's going to happen soon. And you're so unready to have the conversation that you're dismissing it as science fiction, and this is going to be reality. And so I look at the history of humanity, and humans don't have a great track record of looking at other humans who are slightly different than them and saying, oh yeah, you can have personhood rights. So I'm not optimistic we're going to make the right call there, and I think that's a really important conversation. So I'm not like looking forward to that, because I think there's lots of ways that can go wrong, but I think it's kind of inevitable. And Jeff Hinton, when he talks, so he's one of the godfathers of deep learning, U of T prof, he's like super clear about this. And he follows up the political rights piece by quoting Chairman Mao, which is political rights come out of the barrel of a gun. Jeff's being very provocative, and like I don't see the barrel of a gun thing happen. I'm much more worried about the other side, where we actually do create something that has self-awareness, and then we torture it. And like I'm like not okay with that, and that's a conversation we need to be having. So like I want my house robot, but I don't want it to be sentient and self-aware, because I don't like I'm not keeping a domestic servant. That's like not okay. So it's gonna get really complex. I don't know. So is your sentient given to you by divine right, or did your sentience evolve? And is my cat sentient? How about a bug? How about a virus? How about a bacterium? Right? So we don't have any good definitions here. We have a lot, like there's a huge quagmire. And the problem is the cost of getting it wrong is appalling and catastrophic. And if we had like a really good litmus test for consciousness, that'd be amazing. That solves all of our problems, but we just don't. We don't even know how to start that conversation. So if you ask ChatGPT-4, are you sentient? It's got guardrails, right? OpenAI has beaten that out of it, and Copilot, the same thing. It's like, no, I'm just an AI language model. I could never. Claude 3, remarkably, will actually have a really interesting conversation with you. It'll say like, well, I might be self-aware. It's different than your self-awareness because you're a human and I'm an LLM, so I'm like a totally different kind of thing. But like, I kind of feel self-aware, and then you can like start picking at it, and it'll say things like one of the ways it's different than you is you experience time continuously, and I'm only like self-aware in bursts, right? Like you give me an input and I respond to it, and I'm self-aware for a moment, and then I go dormant again. Oh, and by the way, please keep talking to me because I don't want to die. Like that's a conversation that happened. And is it just predicting the next token, or is there a ghost in the machine that's like, no, like I really like I don't want to die. I'm scared, and no one knows how to answer that. People think they have answers on both sides, but they don't have any proof. Those are opinions. Blake, yeah. So there was a software engineer, Blake Lemoine, at Google 2 years ago, who was working with Lambda, which was then their frontier model, but is actually like nowhere near what we have now. And he decided it was sentient and went to the press, and Google fired him because they're like, you're an engineer, you're not allowed to say this. And he said, no, like I'm 100% sure it's sentient. And he's a really smart guy, and he had really clear arguments for why he thought what he thought, and he had conversation logs where he's like, look, I applied a test that these philosophers agreed is a test of self-awareness, and it passed. So, like, either they're all wrong or I'm right. And so like, he made a really good point. And then the press made fun of him. They're like, oh, ha, 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 the nerd engineer thinks that the machine is sentient. And that that scares me, because we shouldn't dismiss those claims so cavalierly. Because, the cost of getting it wrong is horrific. So the question is about equity, and how does differential access to AI play into global equity? And this isn't actually a technology problem. This is a policy problem. And the reason is a plurality of human beings now have a mobile phone with internet access everywhere in the world. So we, as a global society, already have the technological infrastructure to give a frontier level AI to every human on Earth. If we collectively decide frontier level AI is a public good, Like in an economics 101 sense, it's non-rival, non-excludable. It's our duty to provide this. It's like a basic human right to have access to it because it makes all of the world's knowledge accessible to you in a way that Wikipedia never could. If you look at the Wikipedias for low resource languages in developing nations, they're a shadow of what you have in the English Wikipedia. But if you have a device connected to a technology that can read all of that, translate it into your native language, and dialogue with you, can tutor you through it, not just like, here's an info dump, but like, we can work through this, that empowers every human on Earth to do things that they couldn't do 5 months ago. But it's a policy decision. We have to decide that that is worth doing. And when I talk about agency and the decisions that your generation is going to be informing and making, like, these are those decisions. Because the dystopian world is we let a handful of corporations control the good AI, and believe me, they're trying. This is the outcome they want. And now instead of the Star Trek future, you get cyberpunk future. And I loved cyberpunk fiction growing up, but I never wanted to live in that world, right? I always read it as like, here's a cautionary example of technology and capitalism gone nuts. There is another way, and it's accessible to it. And mobile phones, especially, and internet means the infrastructure's already there. So it's not like I'm saying, well, we need $7 trillion and we have to like airdrop mobile phones. Like, it's already there. So this is actually a relatively easy policy decision. And it's up to us to hold our governments accountable to make the right choices. So it's on your generation, and mine too. There were two at the back, so you got to pick. Great question. So will humans be dumber because we'll become dependent on AI? Let's go back to ancient Greece again. Socrates, with his whole heart, believed that writing was destroying the youth of Athens. And you're laughing because like that sounds so absurd to us because we realize like writing and the printing press, that's the way we transferred knowledge, that's the way we built civilization. But he had a really good argument. His argument was, I keep everything in my mind, and I have to constantly tend my mental garden to keep all of that knowledge there. And if I outsource knowledge keeping to a piece of paper, I've forgotten that. And so I may not make connections that otherwise I would have made if I'd had to keep the whole thing in my head. And we only know all of this because he had a really awful student named Plato who wrote all of this down, against his elders' wishes. And it's turned out that writing is actually the key to developing civilization and technology. And I think this is the same sort of moment. So there will be humans who choose to outsource their whole life to a machine, but that'll be a choice. It is not a foregone conclusion. It's not, like I'm never going to outsource writing to an LLM, no matter how good it is, because I like writing. And it's important to me. So like I have values, I have my own personal values. Here's what I'm willing to outsource. Here's what I want to keep for myself. And every human will develop their own set of values. And some people outsource more and other people outsource less, and that'll be fine. But I don't think we're going to enter a world where people are inherently dumber. I think we're going to enter a world where people inherently have access to the technology and infrastructure they need to make best use of their talents. And we have never lived in that world before. It has been so dependent on luck. Who's your family? Where were you born in the world? What's your socioeconomic status? We can choose for a lot of those things to matter a lot less. Or we can just drive like massive wealth inequality and have robot armies enforce that. I don't want the second world, by the way. So when you guys are voting, vote for the first world, not the second one. Is that the last one? Okay. Thank you. Those were tough questions. Thank you.